when Dr. Wood had sort of started pointing out these, what you call these toasted cars, you've got another lecturer, Steve Jones, saying that these cars were damaged by thermite, which fell onto them. It's true. It is. I mean, you're left, and we came up with this sort of, well, what they obviously did was we had the pigeons in New York City were all pre-wired with thermite, and they flew over and they pooped on the towers, and we were sort of doing things like, and then they pooped on the cars because they missed, they missed the towers and flew down to FDR Drive and pooped there as well, so you literally get into these sort of ridiculous sort of scenarios with this thermite, and then you look at the other evidence, such as the fire trucks, which again were parked some distance away with the engine blocks missing. Did they plant the thermite in the fire trucks too?
Beyond belief, isn't it? Unbelievable.
It is.
Well, I hear the music. We'll be back in a minute. Stay tuned, and we're going to get into some more of this and some questions. Back in a minute. Well, we're coming back here and have Andrew Johnson out of the UK. I'm very honored to have him explaining. I am shocked how positively their lies just propagate around the world here, and the truth is hidden. When I first looked into this, when I first became aware of this, I looked at Dr. Judy Wood's stuff, and I said, 80% of the building's been missing? That couldn't be. I saw all these DVDs, never brought it up. Steel is being justified. It just vanishes. I mean, it's like you would blow a dust storm. And I said, there's a level 3 hurricane off of New York, and nobody wants to talk about it. We got 1,400 cars up to a half a mile away that have been toasted. Some of them is unbelievable the way part of it is and part of it isn't, and they're turned upside down. I said, how come I don't know about this stuff? And as soon as I got to that, I said, okay, well, I knew what I was being told wasn't true. And then you look at that picture that Dr. Judy Wood's got an upcoming book here of this picture that was taken. It looks like a water fountain or a bubbler, I think she calls it. I just can't believe it. I mean, there's no way any explosive anything could do this. And then on top of that, this building came down at the speed of gravity, essentially. Totally impossible. And we have a magnetic interference in Alaska. How the heck did that happen? Anyway, Andrew, carry on.
Yeah, Ralph. Well, I think that's a super sort of summary of some of the evidence, really. And I think you've sort of highlighted the problem in terms of when you see that evidence and you begin to take it in, it takes you onto a whole new level, really. And I think, though we've said everything we said and everything, I just get the feeling that some people just cannot go to that level. They've got like a mental block, because as I say when I talk about this, it really does change everything, because we're looking at something which is totally unconventional, and then you have to start asking, well, who's got this technology? My response to finding this out and realizing this after it had percolated down into my being, really, is I actually wrote to all the police chiefs in the UK, and I wrote to a load of Royal Air Force bases to tell them, what you've just said, and ask those same questions. How the hell can this happen?
Hold on just a second. We'll be back in just a minute. Hear the music. We'll be back in a second. Stay tuned. Well, we're back from break here. Got Andrew Johnson out of the UK talking about 911, and the ramifications of 911 are so phenomenal. Who has this power? Who's in control? They could do it again. They could control what? We just threaten we're going to blow up the White House. We're going to blow up the Vatican. I don't know. This is just absolutely astounding. And when you look at all of these questions, and if Dr. Judy Wood and along with Andrew Johnson, they put this into a court. They brought the evidence forward. The people had a chance to come out and say they're wrong. They didn't. Where's all this thermite stuff? Goes clear to the Supreme Court of the United States, and nobody will touch it. Too hot to handle. Where's the media? Too hot to handle. Where's the mis and disinformation? All over the Internet. Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I think it's worth bringing up a couple of other things why, I say to people, there are two reasons why I know that this is correct. And I know that Dr. Wood is absolutely right in what she says. The first reason is the evidence that we've already touched on. And there's a lot more if you go to drjudywood.com and look at all the videos and stuff that are posted there. The second is the reaction to the evidence. Now, I've had to write this book or compile a book, which is called 9/11 Finding the Truth. And again, you can download that from checktheevidence.com. You can download it for free. It's a PDF file. If you don't want to read it off the screen, I've also now created an audio book of it using a sort of synthesized computer voice. It's quite a good computer voice, but that's a large download, but it's free. You can also get a paperback version from lulu.com. All the links are on there. You can read the reviews and stuff. But really, that book essentially documents the reaction to what we've just talked about, and it looks a little bit at some of the behind the scenes of Stephen E. Jones and this sort of thing. And I recommend that people read that to realise why what we're saying about the Hutchison effect and the energy connection is the truth. It is correct. You can only take my word for it on air, but if you study the evidence, I would challenge you not to come to the same conclusion that I have. And another example is this Jim Fetzer character, who was a well-known researcher into the Kennedy assassination. Basically, he says in an email, if Dr. Wood doesn't dissociate herself from John Hutchison, then I'm going to trash her reputation. That's essentially what he says in email, and this is what he then proceeded to do, and he is still doing it. And he also achieved some publicity recently with this new blog he posted, where he reposted a lot of these photographs that Dr. Wood had been had posted for several years, and then he didn't mention her name, and he didn't include a link to her website, and yet he claims, that he's a supporter of hers. And in this blog, he conspicuously misses out the Hutchison effect references and the Hurricane Erin references. Similarly, we had this episode, unfortunately, with this Alfred Weber character. Now, I'd come into contact with Alfred Weber through the Disclosure Project, which is to do with the UFO stuff. And he interviewed Dr. Judy Wood and John Hutchison at his home in February 2008. It's February the 14th, and we have an audio recording of this interview. And he was very, very interested in the relationship between 9/11 and the Hutchison effect. But then, in November of that year, he did an interview with this supposed geoscientist. Maybe she really is a geoscientist. I'm really not sure from the way that she describes things, called Lorraine Murray. And they together claimed that HAARP destroyed the World Trade Center. And in that interview, I think the total length of the interview is about 2 or 3 hours. I've got this all written up in an article with transcripts and audio clips and everything, so you can actually listen to these clips and what they actually say. But they basically say that HAARP destroyed the World Trade Center. They don't mention the Hutchison effect. They don't mention Hurricane Erin, and they even try not to mention Dr. Judy Wood. And Alfred Weber actually says in this interview, he says, now, Loren, without mentioning Judy Wood, please tell me why you think HAARP destroyed the World Trade Center. That's what he actually says, almost word for word, which is very, very strange. And if I may just dwell on that a little moment longer, because I had a very troubling experience with this research in terms of the reaction to it. I spoke at a conference here in England in June, and I met a chap called Richard Dolan there. Now, Richard Dolan has written 2 books about the UFO subject called UFOs and the National Security State, which catalogue the cover-up of the UFO issue between 1947 and the present day. Now, I'd listened to Richard Dolan on, Coast to Coast and these other talk shows, and I very much enjoyed listening to him. He was very articulate, and he came to speak at this conference in England as well about the UFO subject. And, I was very pleased to meet him, and I actually bought him lunch. We were in Leeds, which is a city in the north of England, and I enjoyed his company. And, he's got a teenage son, and I've got 2, son and a daughter who are not far off being teenage. And we had quite a bit in common, actually, and we had a good laugh, and we talked about the Star Trek film. And, Richard Dolan lives in New York State, so I told him about the hurricane. I printed out some pages because I knew I was going to meet him. I put the pages in his hand. I told him about Dr. Wood's legal case. I told him about the Hutchinson effect. I told him all that stuff. And I told him about Alfred Weber, the story that I've just told you. Now, and I shook hands with him. We went off back to the States, and that was in June. And then I was alerted to a podcast that he'd posted, which was posted on the anniversary, in other words, September 11th, 2009. And my friend said, I listened to Richard Dolan, and he was talking about Thermite. I thought he wasn't really. He wasn't talking about Thermite, surely not. And so I went and downloaded this podcast, and it's still available. It's you can go and listen to it yourselves. And I listened to it very carefully. It's 77 minutes long, I think. Listened to the whole thing very, very carefully. And sure enough, he mentions nanothermite in this scientific paper that's been, written, and how credible it was and wonderful. And he didn't even mention at all anything that I'd told him. He didn't mention the Hutchinson effect. He didn't mention Dr. Judy Wood. He didn't mention Hurricane Erin. He didn't mention meeting with me. Nothing at all about anything that we'd spoken about. Frankly, I was shocked because, as we said a few minutes ago, some of this stuff is very difficult to take in, and it really does challenge you on any number of levels. But if to me, an honest person would say, well, look, I've heard about the thermite, and I think that explains it. But there is this other evidence. I'm not sure I believe it, but it's really interesting, and you should go and look at it and see what you think. That you should look at about the directed energy weapons, and there was this hurricane as well. I'm not sure how that fits into the picture, but boy, that is really strange. He didn't say any of that, none of that. Mm-hmm. And that's, for somebody who's researching the UFO topic, which is obviously very, very controversial, and obviously you attract ridicule by talking about that subject automatically. So surely we can't apply the ridicule idea to Richard Dolan as to talking about the stuff that we've just talked about. So why didn't he talk about it? Why didn't he even mention it? Again, I've written all this up into an article to describe all the circumstances to the best of my ability. Mm-hmm. So it really did. That's when I'm thinking, and I actually put in there that this thermite thing seems like a global program, that's being running and put into people's brains. It's almost like a computer virus. It's really strange. And that's been our experience. And then we've had other people in this book that I wrote about who've tried. Somebody actually offered to send me $5,000 if I could get a successful conviction over a 9/11 court case. And this is just some guy. They offered me $5,000. I mean, how am I going to get this? I don't have any control over the courts. No. I'm not so naive as to think that the courts are going to just sort of say, oh, yes, of course, Dr. Judy Woods, she's put all the evidence. We're totally convinced by this. Yes, directed energy weapons did it, and we'll rule in her favour. And, these companies, they'll have to pay the money back. Of course they're not going to do that. No. I mean, we have to try to actually do something within the bounds of the law. But are we going to get the result we want? My view was always probably not. Not definitely not, probably not. That was always my view. But nevertheless, we have to do something. We have to take this action. We have to try and show people that we are serious and that the evidence, as we see it, would stand up in a court of law. And we have to take it as far as we can, which is what we've done. And then for doing that, we just get attacked. Nobody will speak about the court case. In 2008, I asked a fellow 9/11 researcher in the UK. I said to her, you go around the UK, you talk about 9/11. Please, can you at least mention the court case of Dr. Judy Wood, that something is actually going on? We are making legal challenges. I don't need you to talk about the directed energy weapons because I know it can get quite complicated for some people and difficult to accept. But can you say that these US professors have challenged this in a court, over the 9/11 reports? That was basically what I asked her, and she refused. She says, no, I won't talk about it. I won't even talk about it. She refused point blank. So this really showed me that this second level of
how positively they're lies just propagate around the world here, and the truth is hidden. When I first looked into this, when I first became aware of this, I looked at Dr. Judy Wood's stuff, and I said, 80% of the building's been missing? That couldn't be. I saw all these DVDs, never brought it up.
Hours, and we were sort of doing things like, and then they pooped on the cars because they missed the towers and flew down to FDR Drive and pooped there as well, So you literally get into these sort of ridiculous sort of scenarios with this thermite, and then you look at the other evidence, such as the fire trucks, which again were parked some distance away with the engine blocks missing. Did they plant the thermite in the fire trucks too?
Beyond belief, isn't it? Unbelievable.
It is.
Well, I hear the music. We'll be back in a minute. Stay tuned, and we're going to get into some more of this and some questions. Back in a minute. Well, we're coming back here and have Andrew Johnson out of the UK. I'm very honored to have him explaining. I am shocked.
When Dr. Wood had sort of started pointing out these, what she called these toasted cars, you've got another lecture of Steve Jones saying that these cars were damaged by thermite which fell onto them. It's true. It is. I mean, you left, and we came up with this sort of, well, what they obviously did was we had the pigeons in New York City were all pre-wired with thermite, and they flew over and they pooped on the
steel is being justified. It just vanishes. I mean, it's like you would blow a dust storm. And I said, there's a level 3 hurricane off of New York, and nobody wants to talk about it. We got 1,400 cars up to a half a mile away that have been toasted. Some of them, it's unbelievable the way part of it is and part of it isn't. And they're turned upside down. I said, how come I don't know about this stuff? And as soon as